A short story by Paul McCann entitled The Girl That Couldn't Give Away. Barbara was abandoned at birth and never really knew any love of parental emanations, and she was brought up in a convent by some nuns who took her in from the foster parents who were looking after her. After they took ill, they had left them at the convent, and then they died suddenly, leaving Barbara all alone. At 17 years of age, Barbara ran away from the convent and she got a job selling flowers to people on the street. She was very fortunate to have good looks on her side, which helped her to sell the flowers to passers-by. Men often commented on how beautiful she was to look at, as well as how intelligent and quiet she was. At least once a day she would have a proposal of marriage made by someone. Barbara was probably the girl most sought after in all of the city. But she never showed interest to anyone. That was until Finn came along. And it was love at first sight. They met in an unusual way late one afternoon. It was Valentine's Day, and Barbara had sold 3 times her normal amount of flowers, which on this occasion were long-stemmed roses, and she was on her way to the bank to deposit all of the money that she had made that day. She was so happy about how much she made. She had noticed out of the alley a dark figure slip out from behind and grab her handbag. Barbara screamed for help as the thief ran off along the road with the bag. All Barbara's money was inside, the whole day's takings. Barbara tried to give chase, but she couldn't keep up with the robber. Suddenly from a store doorway, a homeless man pounced out on the thief, and a fight ensued. By the time Barbara got there, the thief had escaped, but not with her handbag. The brave homeless man held the bag and then handed it over to Barbara. There was an instant attraction when their eyes met. He spoke first. "Hello, my name's Finn. I believe this is yours." Barbara saw there was some blood on his clothes, and then she noticed there was a knife embedded in his arm. From her mobile phone, she rang for an ambulance, and a short time afterwards, Finn was being put into the ambulance and then brought to the hospital where he was being treated for his wound, and Barbara at all times sat by his side. And later that evening, Finn was discharged from the hospital. As a way of showing her gratitude, Barbara bought Finn some dinner in a takeaway joint, and then she took him back to her flat to eat the meal. And after dinner, she offered Finn to stay over for the night in her spare bedroom. They never went to bed. They just sat up all night talking. They shared some secrets, and a bond of trust was established between them two. Barbara told Finn about living in a convent after her foster parents had died, and Finn had told Barbara about quitting his job as a police detective after his girlfriend was killed by a gangster in retaliation for him putting some gang members away in prison. And eventually this drove Finn onto the streets where he had lived as a homeless person. When morning came, Barbara gave Finn a key to the flat, and she went off to work selling flowers. That morning Finn rose and He was so encouraged by what had happened that someone believed in him again. So he started to do a few things that he hadn't done in a long time. First he had a shower, and then he made some breakfast, and after that he went looking for a job. Barbara had given him a reason to become a better man. That day Finn secured a job driving a taxi. So it was a big day for him. And he had surfaced from the place where he had disappeared years before. 3 months later, Finn and Barbara were in a very strong relationship. He had managed to save some money and bought a cheap car. And they both sold flowers during the day. And at night, Finn drove the taxi. 6 months later, the inevitable happened. Barbara and Finn were engaged to be married. With the date of the marriage now set, flowers were being arranged, care of the florist that they both worked for, and the wedding car was booked and paid for, care of the taxi company that Finn had worked for. The priest from the local Catholic church was going to do the ceremony, and a small number of guests were invited. Barbara and Finn were so happy together, and they were looking forward to a lifetime together as the perfect couple. Barbara asked Mr. Hine, the florist, if he would give her away, as she never had a father to do that. And Mr. Hine said he'd be honoured to. On the morning of the wedding, Finn stood at the altar waiting for his bride to arrive. Time seemed to stop, and Finn became very uncomfortable, waiting and waiting and waiting. The small gathering of people were looking around, and the priest tried to tell a few light-hearted stories to ease the tension in the church. An hour had passed, still no sign of Barbara. And then a lone figure appeared at the back door. It was Mr. Hine the florist. He slowly walked up the aisle with his head at the ground and informed Finn that Barbara was not in the flat when the wedding car arrived. He had tried everywhere to reach Barbara but couldn't find her. And then he handed a letter addressed to Finn that he had found in his suit pocket that had been placed there by Barbara. The priest informed all of the people that the wedding was cancelled, and everyone slowly got up from the pews and left the church. Finn returned to the shop doorway that once was his bedroom, and he sat there in silence for hours. And then he took the letter out that was addressed to him. Dearest Finn, I know you probably won't understand what I am going to say, but I am unable to make a lifetime commitment because of my past. Believe me, Finn, the past few days I've been thinking about many things, about how my parents had abandoned me and left me in this world alone. And then I started to think about us having children and how I could not be a good mother because of the way I felt towards my own mother. In all of my life, I've been hurt, I've been angry and resented what my parents have done to me. And with all of these emotions and negative feelings tossing and turning in my head, I did feel that our marriage would be doomed, and I would not want you to go through that. So I decided to leave before any of this happened. Finn, I hope in time you will forgive me for what I have done to you. Barbara. Finn was devastated. He sat there alone, staring into space, and then he started to remember the person that he once was, the police detective. He took up the challenge, the missing person case, and immediately he went to work to find Barbara. He recalled her mentioning that she had lived with the nuns in a convent. So immediately he checked every convent in the city but came up empty-handed. And then he went to the registry office and tracked some names of Barbara's foster parents as well as her biological parents. And with the help of his old friends in the police force, he checked all of the closed-circuit televisions around the city in the hope that he could see some evidence of where Barbara's whereabouts could be. He showed her photographs all over the town to people and the staff at the airports, the restaurants, the bus companies, the train stations. Finally, he got the breakthrough that he was looking for. One of his taxi driving buddies remembered picking up a girl who looked like Barbara, the girl in the photo. He also remembered being very, very happy about picking up a large fare, as it was a 300-mile trip to Mother of Mercy Convent. He said that the lady only had a small suitcase and she never spoke a word the entire journey. Finn was overjoyed, and immediately he went to get Barbara. He had driven all night, and he arrived at the front gate of the convent and knocked upon the door, but no one answered. So he knocked again, but no one answered. No one responded. Then he heard the sound of what he considered to be angelic voices. They seemed to be coming from an open window in a small building nearby. Finn went to investigate, and as he looked in through the window, he saw that it was a chapel, and in the front pew a group of nuns all sat together singing. Then he saw Barbara there in their midst, singing along with the nuns in harmony. The nuns finished singing, and they all left the church with Barbara walking with them. Finn followed them as they made their way back into the convent, and was undetected when he, too, made his way into the convent. One by one, all of the nuns made their way to their rooms, and Finn watched until he saw the room that Barbara occupied. After things went quiet, Finn softly knocked on Barbara's door. "Come in, sister," she said. Finn slowly opened the door, and he went inside. Barbara could not believe her eyes. She was stunned into silence. Finn sat down beside her on the bed and said, "I love you, Barbara. We don't have to be married. Let's just be together without any commitment. We don't have to have any children. Just as long as we have each other. That's all I want." Barbara was still in shock and said, "How did you find me, and do you really mean what you just said?" Finn smiled and said, "Yes, I meant every word. You are the only thing that matters in my life. And you should know, Barbara." "You should know, Barbara. I love you with all my heart. I was once a detective, and I always get my man or woman." They both started to cry and laugh at the same time. The tears flowed down their face, and they both looked at each other. They kissed They laughed, and they spent the night together in the convent. In the morning, Barbara introduced Finn to all the nuns in the convent before making the announcement that they would both be leaving and returning to their jobs in the city. All the nuns were so happy for Barbara and Finn, and later that day, they said goodbye. Finn and Barbara remained a couple, and they were inseparable. They never married, and they never had children, but they lived together, happily ever after. The end.